About 11% to 20% of veterans of the Iraq and Afghanistan wars suffer from PTSD, or post-traumatic stress disorder. That's according to the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs. And joining me is Dr. Scott Cornelius, clinical psychologist with VA Central Western Mass Healthcare System. He's going to discuss this struggle many veterans face, and Bryan Doe, outreach rep of the Springfield Vet Center, who faced it and is now helping other comrades going through the same thing. PTSD, it's often the unseen injury of some veterans coming back from war. Talk about the struggles that they face.
Many veterans coming back have experienced very challenging, painful things overseas. And for many of them, they've experienced them not just once, but many times over the course of a deployment. And living in a dangerous environment, in an environment such as Iraq or Afghanistan, where it's difficult to distinguish enemy from friendly. It's just natural that the nervous system is always aroused, so the person stays on constant alert. So they come back home thinking maybe that they can put this back behind them and just forget about it. What's common is that they discover that kind of the nervous system stays aroused, and situations that remind them of dangerous circumstances overseas are prevalent here. Crowds, being in a restaurant, driving in traffic, trash on the side of the road can trigger fears of an IED. And for many of them, they don't even realize that they're having these reactions. So the sad thing is, even with all the education about PTSD, many folks coming back from deployment think there's something really wrong with them, and they end up struggling privately before they come in for help.
We're going to get into the stigmatization of that, but before we do that, Bryan, I know we were talking about this off camera. You saw stuff in the military that, even like you had mentioned, here in America, we're not used to seeing that kind of a world around us. That's the kind of things you see in video games or movies, but that's something that you went through, and you had a struggle with this.
Yeah, just like Dr. Cornelius said, I did 8 years active duty in the Army. I had 2 combat deployments to Iraq, totaling 27 months. And definitely, once I got back home after those deployments, I definitely struggled. And again, didn't initially seek help. It took a while for me to really understand what I was kind of going through, and to kind of make that step and to go to seek help. And then I was finally diagnosed with post-traumatic stress, and went about it the right way, and got help at the VA, and it was a great experience for me, so I'm glad I did.
And I know we were also talking about how sometimes post-traumatic stress disorder almost gives that negative connotation. And do you think that maybe sometimes that prevents guys and girls from reaching out to get help because it's almost a title that they're afraid to understand?
Yeah, I like to use post-traumatic growth instead of post-traumatic stress disorder. I think that post-traumatic growth, it kind of, you're going to have, setbacks, and you're going to have, it's just a learning experience. And I think that it needs to be looked at in a positive manner instead of the stigmatization that you're talking about.
There's actually something really unfortunate about the very name post-traumatic stress disorder. The term disorder suggests that there's something abnormal going on, and that something needs to be fixed in the person. And this can lock a person into a struggle against themselves, basically, which is really unfortunate. When in reality, if you look at the symptoms, quote unquote, of PTSD, we are hardwired to have these symptoms. There's nothing disordered about any of them. We're talking about anxiety, about anger, about problems with sleep, symptoms like that. There's nothing about that's abnormal in any way. So I think it's helpful to just think about PTSD as just experiences that someone's having that they're having difficulty with.
What's the hardest part of recovery for a veteran facing PTSD?
It's now known, or we think that the centerpiece to PTSD is a natural tendency. It's a very human tendency to avoid anything that reminds you of the painful experience. So we will go out of our way, all of us, to often to avoid situations, to avoid people, even to avoid our own feelings and our own thoughts and memories that are painful. And the process of recovery from PTSD really involves reversing those patterns of avoidance and going at the person's own pace in a way that they feel comfortable with. But in some way, it involves it always involves taking steps back towards the things that bring up anxiety for you, and that's hard work. The good news is that of the treatments, of any treatments for mental health, there is no stronger treatment than basic exposure work. It's by far the strongest tool that any clinician has in their toolbox. The hard thing is getting folks to do it.
Did you struggle with that, Bryan?
Yeah, that's one thing that I just wanted to say is initially when I first got back, as Dr. Cornelius was stating that all these things were just running through my head. That's exactly the struggle that I was going through, and my clinician suggested that we try prolonged exposure therapy. It took me a while to say yes and to agree to it. Then once we started it, it was a very, very difficult. Very difficult time to initially start, and then I could see the symptoms definitely starting to lessen over time after doing it for a good amount of time. So I definitely would have to say that it benefited me a great deal by going through prolonged exposure.
It seems as if it's a second battle that these veterans have to face, the battle of staying alive overseas, but it's almost this mental battle that they have to fight and win when it comes to this.
Yeah, and it's an interesting thing that you use the term fight, because this is what many of our veterans from overseas, they're trained to be fighters, and they know how to fight really well. And unfortunately, what happens again is that they can start to fight themselves, and they can fight these feelings, and they can fight these memories when they show up. And if you're locked into a fight to try and not have certain feelings, certain memories, certain internal experiences, it's pretty natural that you're going to be snappy with people around you because you're busy, you're preoccupied. So a lot of the work that we do on our unit is exploring an alternative to deliberate control or fighting. And it's learning how to be with these feelings, with these memories, and not be had by them. And that again takes courage, it takes persistence, but it certainly is possible. So that the person can then free themselves up to do what's more important to them.
And that's the road it seems that you have been on, where you fought through that recovery, and now you're with the Springfield Vet Center. Talk about that connection between fighting through recovery and then what led you to be involved with the Springfield Vet Center.
Yeah, I went through again, a difficult time when I first got back, and then again took the right steps eventually to seek help, and then I wanted to do the same thing for veterans as well. Just that I knew that they went through that similar experience, so I found that working for the Springfield Vet Center was just a really good fit for me as an outreach representative. I'm able to get out in the community and talk with veterans and let them know about the services that we offer. And it's been a great experience so far, and I definitely think that veterans need to look into it.
So why would veterans come to the Springfield Vet Center? If I have a vet watching this right now, what does the Springfield Vet Center offer to them?
Sure. Well, the Springfield Vet Center, we focus on readjustment counseling services for combat veterans and their families. So we do everything from, it's a outpatient clinic. We're located in West Springfield, right off Route 5, at 95 Ashley Ave. We actually moved. We used to be at 1985 Main Street in Springfield, and so that's why definitely like to let people know about that. But we offer your traditional therapy as well as yoga, meditation, equestrian, kayaking, many different things that veterans can do, as well as their family. And we also do military sexual trauma, bereavement, and we do marriage and family counseling. 7 out of the 8 of our clinicians are veterans themselves, so that's always really good. It's a real informal atmosphere for the veterans when they come back, and it's very homey, and they can really feel at home, and it's a really nice atmosphere for these guys.
And that's got to be so important for veterans as they're fighting through any PTSD battles that they have, to be able to feel at home with other veterans that may or may not have gone through the same experiences they have.
Right. And that's one of the things our inpatient unit offers as well, and almost to the person that comes through our unit, we hear from them that one of the the most important factors for them is that they're around other veterans who have served in similar situations. So they have this sense of commonality that helps them feel not so quite alone anymore. And a pretty amazing thing happens in that context. They start to often drop their guard a little bit more than they would allow themselves to do in public or in, with other civilians. And so they start to they can have the possibility of getting a kind of a breath of life again. So it's really a privilege to watch over the course of 6 weeks while someone's there. We literally see people coming in really driven by anxiety and driven by their anger. And then by week 2, you see this blossoming that starts to happen as they realize that this doesn't have to be the end point, that there is life out there. So there's a kind of a message of hope that they get.
The light at the end of the tunnel. So incredible. Thank you so much, Dr. Cornelius and Bryan Doe. Thank you.